welcome to another Real World podcast. The clever name of this one will be revealed by Mike Thomas in a moment. We will be discussing the Blade trilogy. I am Matt Waters, your host as always. Mike, how are you? And why don't you talk us through the incredibly clever name you've come up for this?
So welcome to the Thirst winners. As our great philosopher, Drake, not Dracula. He's cool, he's hip. Mm-hmm. He's a millennial Dracula for a new generation.
Yeah.
Gives us some wise words at the end. In the end, the thirst always wins. We'll get to it when we discuss Blade Trinity, but I love how Blade Trinity plays like, how can we make a millennial Blade movie? Only like 10 years before millennials were a thing to be made fun of.
Yeah. And as Jeff Goldblum would say, you asked if you could, not if you should. And,
yes.
Yeah. But before we get there, we got to talk about Blade 1, and then unfortunately we got to talk about Blade 2. But Episode 1, Blade 1, good times for Matt. Mike Thomas feels sort of differently here. I think for you it's 3-1-2, and for me it's 1-2-3, or maybe 1-3-2, I don't know. But let's talk about Blade 1. So Blade is a Marvel Comics character, which I feel a large number of people who have seen this film do not know, because the Marvel logo doesn't appear until I think the third one. And
the third one, yeah.
Yeah. Technically the first Marvel character to get a movie, and released by New Line Cinema, who are a subsidiary of Warner Bros., who own DC. So that's pretty weird.
A full North American theatrical release, I think, is technically the accomplishment.
Oh, I get. Yeah, okay, sure. There were the little adventures into filmmaking that didn't quite come out, or had limited releases. Like, there's multiple Captain America movies that no one's seen. Yeah. Fair enough. Okay, the first full theatrically released Marvel movie character. Blade is a half-human, half-vampire. He is the Daywalker. He has all of their strengths, none of their weaknesses, except the thirst, which always wins. So that's quite a weakness. And he hunts vampires aggressively. And he's played by Wesley Snipes. And it's kind of the level to which Wesley Snipes seemed to attach himself to this character is impressive and frightening in some ways, but he very much is this character who, definitely has changed due to the impact of these movies, which, they call them a cult hit, but I feel everyone has seen Blade, but who am I? Written by your friend of mine, David Goyer, who is embarrassed of superheroes, and directed by Stephen Norrington, who basically did nothing else.
The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Exactly, nothing else. I think there's literally Death Machine, Blade, The Last Minute, and The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. And I think he was going to try and do The Crow, as everyone was at some point. Wow, he lost out on a lot of bad films. Cool. Anyway, Blade sort of came into my consciousness a very long time ago. It was released in 1998, so this film is, oh my god, it's going to be 20 years old soon. Yeah, I think it's badass. It came out before The Matrix, and it basically did a bunch of stuff that The Matrix would later do more famously, but I don't know how far into development The Matrix was. I would have to imagine quite a way, but you're talking people in trench coats, sunglasses in daylight, using guns and swords and martial arts and spiritualism, and there's a secret world not everyone knows about, and slow motion and everything. I think my art teacher when I was in school was like, yeah, The Matrix ripped off Blade, and I was like, what the hell are you talking about? And I now realise he's kind of right. But yeah, I like Blade a tremendous amount. I know you don't feel as strongly about it, but you recently rewatched it, so have your thoughts changed?
My number one thought after watching the first one is Wesley Snipes as Blade is the coolest motherfucker alive. Mm-hmm. I think the issue is, I think the writing is not great in terms of the plotting. Telling fully satisfying stories is not great throughout the franchise.
No.
But in the end, there's always Wesley Snipes being Blade, and Wesley Snipes being Blade is just fucking cool.
Fucking rules.
He moves cool. He fights cool. He is a perfectly, based on the premises that the world establishes, he is a perfectly logical reaction to it.
Yeah.
It is. I love his economy of movement. There is nothing, and I think actually there are moments in the next two films where there's slight deviations of that, and it actually actively annoys me. I'm just like, in this first one, Blade is so coldly efficient all the time. It is.
He just moves and just cuts through vampires. It's amazing.
Yeah.
The thing to talk. The opening scene in Blade 1 is phenomenal. That a human, a gullible human, is lured to this sexy rave club by Tracy Lords, and then it turns out they're all vampires and they want to kill him. Blade shows up, murders every last one of them, and as a sort of statement of intent fight scene, it's one of the best ones I've ever seen. I love the way he kind of progresses through his arsenal of weapons. It's, he moves from, one gun to another gun to his throwing blades to his sword. It just tells you, here's what Blade does. Very quickly, it's very well choreographed, and yeah, I think that first scene alone is probably the best action scene in all three movies, quite easily. You get the sense that Blade is a cool motherfucker, just walking up in his full leather gear and just standing there. Everyone else covered in blood, he doesn't have a drop on him, and just they all run away from him and everything. And he's doing his little flashing his grins and doing his funny fight stuff. I think it's just great, that first scene.
Yeah, and just in terms of in charismatic action performers, which is a skill we've talked about a lot over the year-ish, 2 years-ish. This is one of the best that I've seen, I feel like, in recent, and one of the ones we discussed. And it's something I desperately want to be revisited. This is probably more talk for the last episode, but he is just such a charisma machine when he's fighting. And, he doesn't talk a ton in the movies, but that's fine. Like, that very much fits his character.
Yeah.
And he still gets beats and moments of nuance here and there that deepen who he is as a person.
Yeah.
I don't think there's enough there for him to be the only main character.
No.
Like, I think as we've learned in a whole lot of these superhero movies, the characters are not super deep as it is. They work better in teams where there's less weight on a single character, but Wesley Snipes as Blade is just belongs in the universe.
Yeah. You talk about the charisma. I mean, you can't escape the number of one-liners he has that are just... They are objectively awful, but he delivers them with such conviction, and they fit so well with this character that he makes them work. And I don't know if anyone else could make some of these lines work that he goes with. And when he shoots Quinn in the shoulder and then he does the sort of kind of thing, and just these little moments where he flashes a grin or something like that. I love every one of them. And I think there's particularly towards the end of this film when he's murdering all the bad guys again, as he must do. There's just something about the physique of Wesley Snipes. He's very long and lithe, and just his movement is very convincing. I don't know what percentage of the stunts he does for himself. I feel I've seen him in multiple films where he's doing some degree of martial arts. He's doing spin kicks and Demolition Man. But he just seems like an incredibly athletic dude, and just the way he moves is very unique. You see tons of fight scenes these days where it's one versus many, but the way he kind of moves through a room with agility and sort of elegance of movement almost while he's doing these violent things, I haven't seen much, if anything, like it.
Yeah, there's always... Because it's obviously heavily choreographed action.
Yes.
There's always a danger with that, though, where it feels too choreographed. It kind of takes you out of it. And he somehow walks that fine line perfectly, where it's brutal but choreographed at the same time. I don't know. I can't get enough of it.
For sure.
My head was spinning at the end of this, going, okay, how can we bring this back?
Yeah. They give you these three large scenes where he's kicking ass, at sort of the beginning, the middle, and the end, and in between you have the plot happening. And just, I think this first one, you talk about pacing issues and plot issues, but I personally think the first one is the most sort of tight of the three. I don't think there's a lot of excess weight to it. I think you have your cool action scene, you meet Karen, who act as the audience as she learns what vampires are, what the rules are in this world. They go to they meet Pearl, who is a interesting character. Have another huge,
Mojo.
Indeed, another large fight scene. And then, you have all the stuff, Whistler is taken and Blade meditates on his way to his final fight. And yeah, I think this one just really moves in a way that the other two don't as much. That's why it's my favourite one. I also think that the villain is the best of the three. Stephen Dorff, who I don't know if I could name you another thing he's in.
I think he was in that really bad, '03 movie where Tara Reid played, a microbiologist or something like that. look that up right now.
Awesome.
It's just like an infamously bad movie, and part of the was it like Tara Reid was playing. I'm like '05 Alone in the Dark. I'm nearly positive this is it.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a Uwe Boll movie.
Oh, well, say no more. Yeah, I mean, he basically had...
Excuse me, Tara Reid is an archaeologist and museum curator.
Oh, okay. I could see that. That's plausible. You know, he kind of has the good graces to be in this and then kind of fuck off forever in some ways. But he plays Deacon Frost, who... I just like the vibe of it, where you have... You know, you meet the vampires that are sort of the blue bloods who sit in their sort of dark chamber and plot and scheme, and they're all very upper crust. And then you've got Deacon Frost, who's kind of like a coked up party boy who's listening to his rave music and just sort of... I mean, you mentioned it to me the way you like how his crew are basically just constantly on coke and just grinding around being filthy little punks. It's a good sort of different take on vampires in a way. Well, we've seen them be like outright demonic. We've seen them be, you know, this sort of stuffy upper crust, very formal version. And here you have the kind of 90s frat boy kind of almost vampires. And yeah, I think he's not phenomenal, but I don't think he's actively bad either. And I think he has a good... I think he's fun when he's like telling Quinn and his other people to shut up and stuff like that. Very hammy when he's doing his master plan monologue, but generally speaking, I think he has a sort of good presence to him.
It's a very 90s villain.
Yes.
It's capturing very much a moment in time.
Yeah.
You know, it feels like a Gen X, like, fully realized villain. Like, this is the worst case scenario.
Blade acts as a warning to us all three films.
He has no respect for authority, but at the end of the day, he doesn't want to build anything. He just wants to tear things down. Like
what are his solutions? They're in the deleted scenes. That's what they are.
It's I don't think he's bad. There's just not much there. You know, it's nothing to write home about, but it's nothing to complain about either. Sure. Is what I'd say.
I can't imagine Jet Li doing it, as he was allegedly offered the role.
Yeah,
that seems like an odd choice.
That was very odd when I read that. And his main henchman is a personal fave of mine, Donald Logue.
Yeah,
who is I love Donald Logue. I think
he's funny.
He's been both comedic and dramatic roles over the years that I've loved. If you've never watched Terriers, the one and done FX show, classic show, just got removed from Netflix tragically, but everyone should watch that. Knights of Prosperity was a really underrated sitcom for a year. What's that? Grounded for Life is like one of the last good laugh track sitcoms. Like, he even almost salvaged a season of Sons of Anarchy when that show was long gone as anything passable. Like, just a really great actor that everyone should seek more stuff out for. He plays a cokehead vampire leader here. I'm very confused.
You want to know why he doesn't die from being set on fire at the beginning?
Yeah.
Well, fire can't kill a vampire, Mike.
Yes. And you must stab him in the heart or the head.
Yes.
And he only loses his hand and arm.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't think it has to be silver, but silver helps.
I think it has to be silver.
I think someone gets beheaded by something that isn't silver more than once, and they die.
Okay, well, I mean, losing your head, I think. I guess
fine.
The rules of vampire,
yes.
You can't grow back your head.
Indeed.
I guess.
Well, he gets his hand cut off, he gets set on fire, I think he gets his other hand cut off, he gets pulled into a train, which hits his face repeatedly. It's good times.
It's not really actually... It's not confusing if you only seen the first one, but it's like he's kind of establishing the rules.
Yeah.
It just seems... I think one thing we'll notice as we go through these is that continuity is somewhat of an issue, both in tone and rules of the world, and mostly in tone. But he's great. I think the two main other characters we got to talk about are Chris Christopherson and Nabushi Wright. Yeah. Let's do Nabushi Wright first.
Okay.
Very much of an outlier character in the grand scheme of Blade. She's, if you've seen Inception, she is Juno, and she's playing that role. She is the audience who is thrown in somewhat haphazardly at the beginning, but she's there so Blade and Chris Christopherson can explain the rules of the universe to us. She has a fine little arc-ish. Yeah. Like, it's not a lot. She's been bitten. She She's a hematologist, though, so she wants to find a cure. It seems like she does, but then she disappears from the franchise.
Yeah, it's very weird that she does just find... I don't know if they didn't want her back or if she was busy or turned it down, but I don't think she's bad enough to not warrant getting at least a cameo or something. Like maybe she dies in the next film or something, just for continuity. But
it kind of reminds me of... do you remember the first Men in Black with Linda Cardellini? Or not Linda Cardellini, Linda Fiorentino? And, like, she's set up as, like, Will Smith's new partner, and then the next film, like, she's just like one line explains why she's not there anymore. And here she doesn't. I don't think Nobushi Rai even gets a line, other than
I think she's in like the opening credit montage or something. But
no, I think that's Blade's mom. I could be
wrong. I swear, like you hear her because they do it actually in the second and the third. They use clips and sound bites from the previous film at times.
Okay.
And I swear, like, you at least hear a voice at some point. But
I thought you were being racist for a second.
I was trying my best not to. In this film, with a black lead and a black romantic interest,
yes.
Which, 1998, not bad. First black superhero.
Also, still something that we don't get to have a ton. It did actually stand out to me that it felt like a mainstream action film that it was almost like it felt like now if they made this film she would be white.
Well, his love interests get whiter with each film, so
yes. Yes. And then finally, the only other character that appears in all three films is Chris Christopherson. Actually, he's probably the only other character that appears in more than one film besides Blade. Now that I think about it,
I would imagine so. Yeah.
This is best performance as Whistler for sure.
So good, as this greasy, like, gearhead, like, listening to country music, tired of everything, just, like he's been through the wars, and we'll talk about how he is in comparison in later films, in the next couple of episodes, but I think his work here is fantastic. I think their partnership is so believable. While Wesley Snipes doesn't get to do a lot of, like, dramatic acting, I think the scene where Whistler has been sort of messed up and bitten, and Blade finds him and starts tending to his wounds and everything. I think, in my opinion, that might be the best bit of acting Wesley Snipes does in all three films. They have a very sort of logical, believable partnership.
Yeah, I think that's the key, is that it actually does feel like a partnership. It does not feel like... This is not a Bruce Wayne, Alfred situation.
Yeah, he's not his indentured servant.
And this is also, thankfully, not a master and a servant situation, which they... Like, this is like, they both have the same goal, to kill as many vampires as possible. Yeah. Blade is a little bit more of a field agent, because he's more physically capable, but Whistler can still throw down if need be. But his primary strength is, tech. And
you get the impression that he did throw down for many years before, his knee got fucked up and he got old and... Blade came onto the... I mean, he says, I think, in every film, I've been doing this since before you were born or whatever. And, who knows how long he was fighting vampires before he found Blade. So
the mythology is something that's only hinted at. And I think that's okay. I think, if you look at something like the Bourne series, you can see that there's many drawbacks to going back and peeling back every single onion until you know everything. So it's kind of, I think it's probably, it's okay that Whistler is mostly a mystery, and that it's kind of left to our imagination what his life was like beforehand, for the most part. But the basic premise was Blade was this hybrid that he saved, and the two of them have been working together ever since. I think it's a very cool, enjoyable dynamic that I wish could have been explored more.
Yeah, for sure. But they went in some different directions. I have a small list of things that I do not like about it. I do want to preface that by saying I like this film a tremendous amount. One of the things that I do like that it does is it establishes vampire culture in a very unique way. It's not just, there are vampires, they are monsters. Like, the stuff with the clubs and the safe houses and the glyphs and how there's a class system and a vampire Bible and a vampire god, all of that stuff, it's not something you constantly see. Obviously, Buffy, Joss Whedon, he did a lot there, but this is a very different take on it. And, there's been a ton of vampire movies, so over time there have been some more sort of different types. But I do like that it establishes this sort of hidden world, as it were, of vampires that will kind of evolve over time with each film. But I like what they establish in the early going here.
Yeah. Actually, as I've told you, I don't think the audience knows, but I did a ton of research in college on vampire film and television history.
You did?
And including a 15-page research paper on the Blade trilogy. And
which I read last night.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And then I'll send you my 100-page thesis on Twilight and True Blood later.
Awesome. Does that exist?
Yes. I had to defend that against a panel of professors.
Wonderful.
So I think one of the ideas here that is consistent throughout the trilogy is that our lead villains, they are very academic in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. And they are either hypersexualized or kind of asexualized. In that, like Stephen Dorff, I keep on calling him like Steffendorf, like Steppenwolf.
Steppenwolf, yeah.
Anyway, all of his minions are kind of just like, let's live life and party, like it's, because raves were a thing, whatever, 90s. He's like into studying and books and history and all that, and like, blah, 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 calling back this god or whatever the fuck.
Yeah, and he like outsmarts all these elders in a way as well.
Yes, and then like in the next one we'll talk about it, but like that's also, there's a lot of academia and history going on, like genetic blood work and all that stuff. And even the last one, even though they're much dumber and definitely far more sexualized in their language, like even them, like they had like this group of like misfits basically is able to dig up this ancient being,
and they outwit Blade.
Yeah,
I think in all three, I think the villain is smarter than Blade.
Yes,
and he just has his physicality.
Yeah, and academia is very much a huge part of their culture, which is interesting. I think there's a lot of #problematic imagery with vampires, obviously, because why else would I be writing about it? But, in terms of world building, it definitely creates a little bit more nuance and 3 dimensions to all these characters and the world that they live in.
Yeah, and right from the first scene, it's not that Blade is... Because the common formula these days is there is bad stuff and then a hero comes forth to save everyone. From the first scene, Blade is established as kind of being... He's winning this fight if it's a very slow fight, but they all run from him, they all react to him, they keep away from him, and it goes on throughout. Arguably gets worse so each time, and I think that's something to kind of make note of, is that it doesn't follow this current formula where he has to emerge and become the hero and then save the day. He already is, and he's been doing his work already, and in fact you don't really understand his full deal until about 55 minutes into the film. Like, if you have a history with the character, and this already existed by the time I saw it, so I didn't see trailers or anything, or read the back of the box or anything like that, so I don't know how upfront they were with what Blade was, but you do wait quite a long time to get the kind of info dump of like, okay, Blade's mother was bitten, he has these strengths, he has these weaknesses, etc. And it's very interesting that they kind of just show, don't tell for that long, and then they give you like the necessary couple of lines of dialogue to fully explain it.
That's a really interesting point that I actually didn't even consider at all. Yes, they really do just kind of throw you into it. And as you started off with that point, it was like, it's basically like Batman at the beginning of The Dark Knight, where it's like he is firmly established in this world and people and his enemies are running from him.
Yes.
And how refreshing was that?
Yeah.
It didn't even dawn on me how refreshing that was, but there's been so many superhero movies in recent years where I'm just like, oh god, the fucking obligatory origin movie. Like, seriously, who gives a fuck? Like, it is like very few of them have been done well, and it's just like just throw us into the action. Like, the only acceptable ones, as far as I'm concerned, the only acceptable ones going forward are things like, how did teams come together, like the first X-Men, the first Guardians of the Galaxy. That I get. But, like, we don't need to see how these powers came to be or whatever.
No,
fuck that.
You're hooked. Like, you see a badass dude killing people with many interesting weapons, and you're like, cool, I want to know more about this dude. And you just go with it, and it works. Like, you don't need to ground him and build him from nothing, as it were. But, yeah. I think the special effects have not aged well at all. No. It came out in 1998, so you can't not mention it. But I also don't hold it against it too much. But from Deacon Frost like dodging the bullets in weird slow mo to all the stuff with La Magra at the end when he turns into the Blood God and he's like turning into moving sentient blood almost. And they actually wanted to take it even further to where he was like a giant hurricane of blood, but they said that they couldn't get the effects right. And it's like, well, you didn't really get the effects all that right on the stuff you did do. But I mean, yeah, they used some practical effects elsewhere, and I think those are the things that sort of really stick out, and kind of the very 90s ass computer simulation when he's showing the plan on the screen, it's like, this is very old tech that you're working with there. Yeah,
it is, however, the only Blade movie to not do a CGI Blade at any point, which I was appreciative.
Oh god, we will talk about that next time. I do think this is something they will do going forward, but in this first one, the scenes where he's just on the street, whether it's chasing down the cop who's the familiar or having his interaction with Deacon Frost. This is a very large black man wearing a trench coat and sunglasses with a sword sticking out the back of his jacket, and at multiple points he wields a gun. And bar a couple of seconds where people like shriek in horror when he has a gun out, no one really seems to bat an eyelid that he's there. And they will play the note of sort of the world reacting to Blade as they go forward, but it is a bit jarring that he just seems to walk through cities like invisible almost. And it's something loads of films do and TV shows, but yeah, it's a little bit jarring that this dude could walk around looking like he looks and no one gives a shit.
It's really the sword. The sword really makes it like an issue. It's like everything else, like, okay, New York's pretty fucking weird. But like
true.
Or I think it's New York. Is it Chicago? I thought it was New York.
I think actually they hint at it being New Orleans.
Oh, okay.
Which is
New Orleans is really fucking weird. It's really the sword that just kind of makes it kind of an issue. But they do address it. It's a large plot point in the last one. So
what do you think of the stuff with his mother? Because we assume his mother died, and that's the story you're told. She was bitten while pregnant with him, or possibly in labour with him, hence the sort of hybrid. And then it's revealed near the end that not only is she alive, but it was Deacon Frost that turned her, and because of vampire aging, she is basically the same age as Blade, and they have these kind of Oedipal scenes where it's kind of sexualized the way they interact with each other. I thought it was a bit much to... I think they were just trying to stack the sort of pile on the sort of you should hate Deacon Frost thing by being like, oh look, and he was the one that turned his mother and he keeps her around as potentially a sex slave or whatever. But yeah, I thought that was a bit much.
Yeah, it's a little too neat, a little too I thought it was the idea that he saw Nobushi, right, like, oh look, someone who vaguely resembles my mother, like let me like save her. Like I thought that was enough.
Yes.
I didn't think she needed to come back at the end.
Nice.
And then when he stabbed her with his penis, that was really a bit much, but
As you can read in Mike's essay, it's all very symbolic. So the thirst is and Blade taking a serum that suppresses his bloodlust, literally. I thought it was kind of a decent little hanging plot thread to play with, where they say that it's getting less effective, and this lingering thing of what happens when it doesn't work anymore? Will Blade be able to keep doing what he does? And it sort of like puts a clock on this man that is otherwise seemingly invincible. And Karen also...
They didn't really address it.
No, that's where I'm sort of going with this.
Okay.
Karen also, she basically cures vampirism, which is like, oh, okay, cool. And then she says that she can cure Blade of his thirst entirely, but then she goes, oh, but you may lose all your strengths. It felt to me like kind of a unnecessary sort of... She almost contradicted herself, but then the final dangling plot hook is he rejects the cure and fully embraces that he needs these strengths to do what he does, and asks her to make him a stronger serum. And it's like, I can see why you would make this choice of like, oh, he's got to make this huge decision, and it's like a hanging dilemma. But I feel there was enough there without it, and it needed more or less, if that makes sense. Because I mean, the film isn't all that long. It's, I think, under 2 hours, and you could either just add in a bit more stuff with the thirst and like, should he cure himself, and like, longing for a human life, or you just cut it completely almost.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you're right in that They just didn't do enough with it.
Yeah.
It felt a little obligatory.
Yeah. All right, that's pretty much it. One thing that we did want to keep track of, I know, is the one-liners as we go through, and I personally think this one has the best ones. From Wesley Snipes, like saying, "Motherfucker, you out of your damn mind," when the cops try and shoot him, to, you know, "It looks like your mascara's running," which has some problematic undertones, as you wrote about in the essay that no one will get to read. And then the immortal, "Some motherfucker's always trying to ice skate uphill." Blade has great dialogue, and I defy anyone to deny that.
Yeah. I also like we're not exactly the March of Dimes over here. We're just talking about funding the operation.
Absolutely.
Blade's great.
Blade's great. Blade kills all the vampires, and at the end of the film, he's in Russia, and we're not quite sure why. And we will find out in the next film what he's doing.
Because all Eastern European countries are the same.
Yes, exactly.
Because he is not in Russia. He is not actually in Russia at the start of the next film. I'm not criticizing you. I think the film is like basically acting that way.
Yes.
Also, how does Blade fly?
Boats. Maybe he uses a boat. Maybe he stows away on a cargo ship. Maybe he has a private plane. I don't know. How does Blade fly? Those are questions you can all ask yourselves between now and our next episode. This has been The Thirst Winners, Episode 1, at EnterTheRealWorld.com. Mike and Matt on SoundCloud. Look everywhere. We've got Star Wars coverage. By the time you hear this, the new Marvel Cinematic Universe podcast should be available for everyone to listen to. There's lots of stuff coming. This has been good. It's time for Blade 2 soon. Farewell.